If you are not already aware, the end of life for the Windows 10 operating system will be at the beginning of October this year. What this essentially means is no more updates, and without updates, the risk of your PC being compromised becomes much more of a possibility. Now, upgrading to Windows 11 is free, but this does come with some caveats. The first concern is most likely going to be the hardware requirements. Currently, the OS requires TPM 2.0. At least that's what Microsoft is showing on their website. There has been news that's been contrary to this requirement, but make no mistake, if you want to get security updates in particular, TPM 2.0 is going to be required. On top of that, Microsoft is warning users that there will be bugs for systems that don't meet the minimum requirements. There's a big reason I personally haven't updated to Windows 11. It's the same reason I hesitated to upgrade to Windows 10. Those reasons mainly being compatibility and bugs. It has been apparent for some time that Windows 11 hasn't quite ironed out much of its issues despite it having been around for almost 4 years come this October. That doesn't exactly inspire confidence in upgrading. One of the biggest red flags for me was the performance issues it exhibited with the latest generation of CPUs. There is also the concern with new apps that come with Windows 11, which has been described as bloatware alongside privacy concerns when it comes to personal data. Because of this, I decided to take a look at some alternatives, and one that isn't quite an alternative, but we'll get to that further down the line. Now, there are a few key things that I'm personally looking for if I'm going to switch to a different OS. I want to make sure the OS is compatible with my PC. I have games on a ton of different platforms like Steam, GOG, Epic, and so forth, so having them work on the new OS is important. If you follow the channel, then you know I'm someone who is big into emulation. The OS definitely has to support emulation, or basically it's a no-go. Another concern I have about moving to a new OS is fan games, unofficial PC ports, and PC mods. While these aren't the biggest priority, I do still want to make consideration for it. After that, I have a few things we'll call miscellaneous. This includes controller support, network sharing, portability, and most importantly, user-friendliness. The biggest alternative out there to Windows is without a doubt Linux. With that being said, Linux has always felt a bit intimidating. To me at least. Linux is a free open source operating system, and its open source nature means that there have been several, and I do mean several different forks of Linux developed over the years. These forks are referred to as distro. Now obviously trying to look at every single distro of Linux would be a bit much, so I narrowed the list down to 4. Before we jump into the first OS, I do want to highlight some of the game related apps that I've become aware of during my time with Linux. Outside of the Steam app, Lutris is probably the second go-to app for gaming. Lutris is trying to do a yeoman's job of supporting a ton of games and gaming platforms. Through Lutris, you can download games from Steam, GOG, Epic Game Store, EA app, Ubisoft Connect, and those are just the launchers I know offhand. It can also run emulators like DuckStation, PCSX2, Dolphin, RPCS3, and once again, those are just some of the emulators it supports. It also can run older PC games and portable PC games as well. Now, much of this is done through another application called Wine, and maybe you've heard of it. Wine is short for Wine is not an emulator. It is a compatibility layer which basically translates the Windows programming language. Steam has its own version of this known as Proton. Wine and Proton helps to ensure good performance, and has been the main driving force behind the support that you find with SteamOS used on Steam Deck and other handheld devices. Another well-known application that I was made aware of during my time using the different operating systems is the Heroic Launcher. Heroic Launcher lets you run games from GOG, Epic Store, and Amazon Games, and it integrates your catalog into the application flawlessly. The interface is outstanding with a filtering feature that definitely makes games for each platform easier to find. Both Lutris and the Heroic Launcher also give you the option to add games to the Steam library. With all that being said, you'll see during the course of this video that things aren't as simple as I wish they could be with these applications. So let's not delay this any longer and get to the first OS that I tried out, Bazzite. If you've been following the current trend of gaming handhelds, then it's more than likely you have heard this name come up a few times. The Bazzite OS has for a while now been the recommended alternative of the Steam OS, and after using it, I can totally see why. Out of the box, Bazzite takes a great deal of the guesswork out of configuration. Even before you download the installer, you're taken through a system and software customization wizard. For me personally, I decided to try out their HTPC option, given this was always the setup I intended for my PC. Unfortunately, Bazzite is currently in beta for NVIDIA GPUs, but I have to say, even while it's currently in the testing phase, the experience has not been bad thus far. Now, the biggest draw to Bazzite, in my opinion, is an option that allows you to switch between a game mode and a desktop mode. After I completed the initial setup of Bazzite, which started in desktop mode, the next time I started the OS, it instantly set up game mode. If you've ever used Steam's big picture mode, then the interface should come as no surprise when you start navigating. Now, I don't know if this was specific to using the beta, but when launching games through game mode, I found that I wasn't able to go above 1080p. Later on, I discovered that you can up your resolution in settings, thus removing the cap. When it comes to running games through Steam, most of the games I tested ran well. There were a few outliers like the not too long ago released Clair Obscur and the King of Fighters 13 Global Match that were having performance issues. I do want to mention at this point that there is ProtonDB.com, a website that provides a list of games that are compatible with Steam on Linux. If you're running into a problem with a specific game, you'll certainly want to check here, as there are usually some ways to fix issues that come up either through using a specific compatibility layer version or launch options. If you've only purchased PC games through Steam, then I personally think your loyalty will be rewarded because it's definitely the most compatible launcher available. I mean, it does sort of have to be, given that they have a device that runs games on a Linux OS after all. I tried out EA App and Ubisoft Connect using Lutris, and well, things didn't quite go as planned. While I can certainly get games to run through both the launchers themselves, it wasn't properly integrating with Lutris. It's still possible to at least add the launchers as a Steam shortcut, but I would have loved to be able to add the games individually, as it would just make for a better experience, especially in game mode. Ubisoft Connect definitely seems to have some issues that need to be ironed out, though I did manage to get some games running on it. Using the Heroic launcher, things fared a bit better. With that being said, when installing and running games from the Epic Store launcher, I found that one of my games that supports DLSS was not working. I thought I found a workaround for this, but that workaround didn't work. While GOG did support games with DLSS, it did not unfortunately support HDR. It's not a deal breaker for me personally, but it might be for some. So PC games overall seem like they're in a pretty good place on Bazzite OS. But what about emulation? Initially, I attempted going to Lutris for emulation. As much as I appreciate what Lutris is trying to do, I ran into a few roadblocks. When setting up games for Lutris, I thought I would have to painstakingly add one ROM at a time. Some research, however, uncovered that you can just drag and drop your whole set of ROMs per system from the File Explorer and it will run a check on them. If Lutris successfully identifies a ROM, it will then match it with an emulator. This can be both a convenience or a problem, as there doesn't seem to be an option for you to select a specific emulator for a given system. There were many cases where the ROMs I added to Lutris just did not detect a related system. After all the time I spent with trying to add ROMs to Lutris, I only managed to get PCSX2 running before basically throwing my hands up in defeat, at least with Lutris. Fortunately, there is a way to easily download and install emulators and an alternative way to add them to Steam. I've done a video for setting up Steam ROM Manager in the past, and it does work with Bazzite OS. Setup was pretty easy to do. I do want to mention though, something I had to do additionally for the DuckStation emulator in particular. For whatever reason, certain permissions can prevent DuckStation from accessing certain folders. Luckily, Bazzite provides an application to circumvent this known as FlatSeal. Definitely remember this name because you may have to install it on another Linux OS. RetroArch had an issue with going into full screen through the desktop, but game mode worked no problem. And CMU had an issue with running in game mode. The only emulator I couldn't get working was Xenia. Now, I do want to mention one application I did not try, which is MUDEC. This seems to be the more user-friendly of the options available, but my biggest problem had to do with it basically wanting to install everything on one storage device. Overall, with some additional time, I feel like I'd be able to get all my games running through Bazzite, so emulation is definitely a go in my opinion. Most of my fan games work fine, and I found that most of the unofficial PC ports are supported natively for Linux. I definitely recommend Lutris for portable games. In terms of controller support, my DualSense worked with mostly everything. Steam inputs can be both a gift and a curse, especially when it comes to PC games that are not a part of Steam. It can be simple enough to exit out of Steam to disable Steam inputs, but I found when using game mode, Steam will automatically reopen, turning Steam inputs back on. I've tried disabling Steam inputs, but this did not resolve the issue. I also found I had to disconnect and reconnect the controller to get out of Steam inputs as well. You'll usually see the color change to indicate whether Steam inputs is being used, though every once in a while a strange thing happens where the color disappears and it looks like the controller is off. So as a word of advice, check to see if your controller is still connected if you ever run across this. I also found network sharing with SMB worked as well, though I will say it didn't just instantly work. In earnest, things not instantly working happen a lot with Bazzite, but I believe restarting the OS just got things working, so keep this in mind if you run into a hurdle. Portability was also good with Bazzite. Some of you may be asking, what do I mean when I say portability? While I purchased a 500GB SSD drive to test the different operating systems, I still have my other storage in the same PC. Fortunately, Bazzite does have the ability to read the Windows file system, so transferring things over or just running things from the Windows storage was not a problem. As a word of caution though, I don't recommend running portable games from your Windows storage. Don't be like me. Having access to my other storage was especially helpful for my ROM collection, and it's just nice to know that I won't have to worry too much about transferring things over should I decide to completely jump ship from Windows. Bazzite definitely fits the user-friendly bill in my opinion. One thing I've been waiting to talk about is the App Store that this OS provides. Just like Apple's App Store, you can easily search, download, and install apps. The only difference is all the apps on Bazzite are free. At least all the ones I downloaded were. There were even emulators available. It really was an eye-opener for me. As much as I thought Windows to be an open platform, it really does pale in comparison when it comes to how simple it is to install things that take additional steps to do on Windows. I finally learned about FlatHub and Flatpaks, which is what's essentially behind Bazzite and other Linux operating systems that have an app store available. It really does make things so much easier to set up. I was able to pretty much do everything without once touching the command line, though I will admit that I did try it once and failed miserably. The desktop environment known as KDE is so similar to Windows that you should feel somewhat at home with navigation. I really enjoyed messing around in Bazzite OS, and so far, if I was getting ready to take the plunge, I think Bazzite would be an obvious choice. I'll be leaving a link to downloading Bazzite and the ProtonDB website in the comment section below. Of course, this is just the beginning of this journey, so if you found this video to be informative, please be sure to give it a like and consider subscribing, as I will be continuing to journal my journey into different operating systems with new videos. For now, this is the Core, your entertainment techie, signing out.